Snehal Pradhan to Sports Talk by Sports Paddock. Thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I shall give a brief introduction about you so that our viewers know a little bit more about you. So you are no stranger to the world of cricket, as you've been playing for the past 15 years, and you've played for the Women's World Cup as well between 2008 and 2011. And right now you are a media professional and have established yourself as an award-winning journalist, and you are a cricket commentator as well for big media houses like Star Sports and BBC. And you currently have your own YouTube channel called Cricket with Snehal, where you have a crazy following of over 235,000 followers and over 15 million channel views. And to top that off, you even co-authored a report for women cricketers called An Equal Hue, where you talk about the current situation and where we stand and areas to work with and suggestions to improve. So we shall directly dive into that. So first things
it sounds like a lot when you say it like that.
It is a lot because I personally read it and it has a lot to cover because it's a very long report, but it talks about so many things that matter, especially for women, like not just what the administration should do, but even the struggles at the grassroots level and how we should improve that. So it's a very, very interesting report. And to top it off, and the first question is, what made you want to write this report? Like what made you want to do it?
So the report is a joint effort between three of us. Siddhant Patnaik and Karunya Keshav are my co-authors. The two of them have co-written a book on the history of women's cricket in India. And the three of us were the only three Indian journalists in England for the 2017 World Cup, which you might remember, where India lost that final by just 9 runs.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was the heartbreak of that loss. It was thinking of, we're so close to having a World Cup and now we're not. That made us think. Siddhant and me started it off thinking, Siddhant and Karunya both had been writing on the women's game for a long time. And we thought, what are the recommendations that we can make? So we prepared a draft report, a very, very smaller scaled down version of this.
Okay.
Siddhant had a conversation with Nandan Kamath of the Sports Law and Policy Center. And they said, this is an excellent idea. You guys should take it up in a big way. And they gave us basically the platform to expand and deepen the scope of the report. And then that's what we did for the next year or so. Siddhant, unfortunately, wasn't well, and because of his health, couldn't continue. He passed away in 2019.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
After which Karunya came aboard, and and we finished the report together. And then a year after Siddhant's passing, had started back in 2017 from that place of pain to hopefully it will lead us to a place where India can win a World Cup.
Wow. And, I'll carry on one question I have from that point you said, where India, though being so close, has missed it. And we have this underlying tag of being the underdogs, and it's worked well for us in the past. But you spoke about in your report something about mental strength and mental well-being in terms of a skill. So how do Indian players, especially women, take this on? How do they develop this from actually converting these high pressure, high moment challenges to big wins?
It just comes down to high quality competition. If you look at why certain players and certain countries seem to produce players of this mentality, where they have that, winning mentality, and they have that whatever killer instinct and the ability to win big matches, it's because they live in a very competitive domestic system or a very competitive elite system, which is then filtering out people who don't have that mentality, and therefore you have a team full of people who have that mentality. So if you look at the domestic cricket in Australia, it's structured such that the pathway just condenses talent at every step, and their women's Big Bash or even their women's one-day tournament domestically is at a very high standard. Similarly, England put a lot of money into their top 20 players, so they gave those top 20 players a very competitive environment, even though they don't have that domestic structure. So either
Okay.
you have to create that elite environment, or you have to create that elite pathway, and then the players have to just sit in that and cook almost for
Exactly.
a number of years until you get the finished product. So England had gone professional and created that elite system in 2013-14. 4 years later, they won a World Cup. They beat India in the final. So that's where I think that that mentality comes from.
So would the answer be having more IPLs, more tournaments, or would it be like small, high quality, as you say, short ones to be more productive? Like how, because as it is, the calendar is so cramped. So how do they fit it all in?
The answer is to have a pyramid. So you have a very wide base, a number of girls playing at your school level, number of girls playing at your state level, but then you transition them into a zone, then you transition them into what is called the Challenger Trophy, which is the top 3 teams full of Indian players. Then you transition them into an IPL where you add foreign players, and then they get into the Indian team. So that is the way to basically have that wide base, lots of participation, which is the advantage that India has as a populous country where cricket is already popular. And then condense that talent up, make them go through many steps such that by the time they get up, so more IPL, more domestic cricket, more of everything. I mean, the calendar has lots of space.
That's true. That's true. But, you know, talking about that pyramid and talking about that base, when a girl, say, suppose in your initial days, you and me, when we got into it, we fell in love with the game. But for girls who actually fall in love with the game and want to take it up professionally, don't necessarily have the guidance and support. Like we have our parents backing, but how else do we have that confidence to be like, okay, I want to take this up as a career, but how? Like when men take it up as a career, it's like, okay, this is going to be my job. But for women, they have other things to call their job as well, and not cricket. So why can't we make cricket a women's job as well?
Yeah, that's an important question. It's something we addressed in the report in terms of making even domestic cricket financially viable. Finally, parents are going to support their kids even more and push them even more towards coaches, towards facilities, when they know that, you know, they might get a job out of it. That's the way the mentality works in subcontinental countries.
Exactly.
So creating more job opportunities at the domestic level, having domestic cricket fee structures revised. Fee structure is there right now, but it needs to be at a stage where it can be a viable career, and a women's IPL will definitely help that happen. And then you have facilities at the grassroots. I mean, I know a 7-year-old kid, I live in Pune, a 7-year-old kid who lives 2 hours away in Shirur, who is an incredibly talented player, but she doesn't have anyone in her area who can guide her. By chance, I run an online coaching program, and she joined that program. So now we are connected, and now I can guide her into the system,
Online.
into the pathway. Otherwise, yeah, but otherwise they're not connected. They don't know the pathway. They don't know exactly where to go.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's the online coaching program that I run.
So do you think we need more people at a grassroots like you who take care of this, or do you think BCCI can come in and sort of dig deeper instead of taking care just of the like creme de la creme? How do they play a part in digging deeper or trickling down into the basics of basics?
So that's where state associations come in. I mean, to be honest, right now it's not in the BCCI's responsibility to look after what happens in the small towns outside Pune. It's the Maharashtra Cricket Association and each state association's responsibility. But the BCCI can incentivize these organizations to really put money into their women's programs. Say that, you know, if your women's team wins the national tournament, we'll give you X amount of money extra on top of what we normally give you. So then that incentivizes state associations. Okay, let's find, that's a big amount of money. Let's go to the small towns and find the talent, and in 3 years time win that tournament and win that amount of money. So the economic incentives and the administrative incentives need to be there, because the fact is that some state associations really support their women's programs and some state associations don't care.
Don't support at all. Is it also because there is no sort of incentivization, or there's no sort of, you know, push from any end that they don't want to do it, or because they just haven't seen any talent?
It's a bit of both, because right now they're being asked, when women's cricket was taken over by BCCI in 2006, suddenly these state associations were being asked to handle, you know, 2 streams of cricket. Handling boys cricket is a huge headache as itself.
Of course.
On top of that, you add women's cricket. So a lot of state associations looked at it as, you know, some unnecessary evil. or a necessary evil, sorry, that we just have to do because it's there. And some state associations were a little more progressive, and they put actual time, effort, and money into their women's programs. And you can see the difference in results on the domestic circuit. Take Mumbai, Bengal, they really do women's cricket a lot better than other states. So that's why I think the incentive needs to come from the top, from the BCCI. The BCCI is the body that controls the money, and you can provide a financial, provide the financial incentive to the states. Money talks. If you're providing prize money of say 50 lakhs for the women, for the association that wins the women's championship, which association will not want to win that?
Absolutely. This is actually a very, very good point. And of course, I'm sure they thought about it and maybe they have plans for it. But do you think such plans will be implemented in 2001? Like, what are your ideas considering 2021 for women?
It's been a tough year, 2020.
Yeah,
we thought that when India reached the final of the 2020 T20 World Cup, even though they lost heavily, we thought that, this is once again proof that India has the talent. Come on, women's IPL in 2021, let's see it. But then pandemic happened, and everything has been pushed back almost by a year. The international calendar for the women's team looks completely uncertain right now. So 2021 has to be a make-up year. I mean, that's my wish list. It should be a year where the BCCI would really try and make up on lost ground for women's cricket, and put in a lot of focus on preparing the team for 22, because 22 is a big year. You have the ODI World Cup and the Commonwealth Games where women's cricket is being played for the first time. So 2021 should be a year where you really prepare that women's team, prepare the base, get the women's IPL for God's sake, and just start. What are you waiting for?
But how do you take the women's IPL in terms of the broadcasting and viewership? Like, do you think they'll be able to handle it? Do you think they should sort of like keep it back to back after the men's, or should there be some sort of connectivity? How do they go about it? Because broadcasters will go to something that's big, something that's really viewing. How do they tackle that whole situation?
So I think right now, to start off with, the women's IPL should be played alongside the men's IPL, like the women's T20 challenges. To start off with, you have 1 or 2 years like that, where it's played maybe afternoon games and then followed by a men's game. And then in the playoff week, you have the final round and you have those showcase with the prime time slots. And then the women's IPL can stand alone, because what happens is the men's IPL franchisees, they work all year round, but the tournament is only 2 months.
Correct.
So the rest of the year, if they have more opportunities to show off their brands through a women's tournament, it's a win-win for them also. I'm assuming, of course, that a future women's IPL has the same men's teams or has the same teams as the current men's IPL does, because there are a lot of benefits to that. You don't have to start from scratch. You already have a base set up in terms of fans. You already have facilities. You already have staff who are available, and those can be shared resources. Correct. But all the franchises have to buy into that. The BCCI has to almost, I think, they have to not give the franchises a choice. This is the way we see the IPL going forward. You have to buy into it.
I can actually imagine. And now there are talks about having more teams in IPL for men. Like they're talking about in 2023 having 10 teams for IPL. So I don't know how much of a challenge it will pose then, but this is definitely a good way to think about it and a good way to get eyeballs on women's cricket, because the entertainment level will be the same, because they will see Smriti Mandhana, Harmanpreet Kaur, everyone, all the bowlers, Poonam Yadav, all doing a brilliant job, but they just need the eyeballs to sort of showcase their talent. And coming to that, in terms of broadcasting, what made you actually get into the media industry? I mean, why didn't you just want to be a coach and just sort of channelize all your experience and target all your, history to that?
Yeah, I thought about it at the time, becoming a coach, but then, there were my colleagues taking up coaching, and I thought coaching is something that everyone can do. What can I do that only I can do? And I had started writing blogs even through my playing career, and my blog had been picked up by a cricket website. And even while I was playing, I was writing the odd article for them. And so then I thought, after moving out of playing, I should go into media work, mainly writing about women's cricket first, because there wasn't a lot of writing happening. So this is pre 2017. 2017, suddenly everyone woke up, oh, we have a great Indian women's team. But before that, one of my objectives was to increase, the exposure given to the Indian women's cricket team through my work writing. So I started off a freelance writing career. In a couple of years, I started getting opportunities as a commentator, and those have been continuing to grow. And my YouTube channel was, again, the thinking was that, if I go to a regular coaching academy, I'll probably be able to teach 30 kids, 50 kids. Through YouTube, I might be able to reach 30,000 kids.
More kids, yeah.
So, and that again was something that at the time I had the skills, or rather I learned the skills to do. I had the interest. I was already fairly technical, fairly techno savvy. So I taught myself editing. I taught myself how to shoot, how to script, how to basically build up the entire channel. Yeah. So for the first 3 years of the channel, almost 2.5 years, I was doing everything myself. Now I have a team that helps me in the content creation. But for the first few years, it was just like a one-woman show.
And you carried it out for 3 years. I mean, you stayed motivated also for 3 years, and you've built on it also for 3 years. It's hard to stay motivated with something like that, because honestly, YouTube is not easy. Driving people to see your content, read your content is not easy, because people get very moody. I mean, they're like, okay, why do I have to see this? And considering it's women's cricket, did you see a boom, or did you see a sudden increase in inquiries and people coming in after 2017?
I heard a lot about this from academies that I am connected to. They keep saying that, there are girls who are just walking in, and so many more inquiries, and suddenly we have enough girls for a girls team. This was what people on the ground were telling me in terms of girls participation, because it's that thing that you can't be what you can't see. And suddenly in 2017, where there was that perfect window where there was no men's cricket being played at the time, and the women's team did so well that it just grabbed the focus of the entire nation. And then the heartbreak almost seemed to endear the entire country to the women's team even more. So both those things together have really boosted participation on the ground. And every time India does well internationally, which is broadcast well, you see a boost in participation on the ground. So that is just an undeniable factor, that the visibility and the fact that you have role models, if they do well, drives participation.
That's even better, because when someone sees a Smriti Mandhana, or even the little like stars like Jemimah or even Shefali, it's something for them to be like, okay, I can start small and I can even make it big. Because Jemimah started at 17, I think, when she made it big. She was hardly 17 or 18. And
played for India at 17, Shefali even earlier, at 15.
15, and to be exposed to that sort of pressure, talent. Exactly, and to be exposed to such pressures, I mean, it's seriously inspiring to see such girls like come up to that level and live up to the expectations and handle, even if it's a defeat, to handle it so well and keep going. So really hats off.
And Sunaina, the likes of Jemimah and the likes of Shefali are coming up almost despite the system, not because of the system. So just imagine, we focus our resources into grassroots cricket, India will dominate world cricket for the next 10 years. I give this example of, finding gold in the middle of the land, which is what we've done with Shefali Verma. And then compare that to building a gold mine, and just think how much more we're going to get.
I know, because it'll just start like pooling in, because even like girls, if they play from within and not because of, sports just being attractive, if they actually love the sport and come to play for themselves, it'll definitely make them stick and like stay with it. Yeah. And absolutely. I have one last question for you. I want to know, throughout your cricket career, can you tell me one or at least two most memorable moments?
One was obviously getting to fulfill that dream I had, that in 2002, Jhulan Goswami made her debut as a 19-year-old. And I saw her on TV, and yet another example of, how visibility helps. I saw her on TV. I had already started playing cricket at the time, but then I had that dream, wow, I want to open the bowling for India with Jhulan Goswami. So actually getting to do that and fulfilling that dream was quite powerful, really special. And I mean, it's just kudos to Julan that I've retired a long time back, and she's still playing. She's as of today, it's her birthday. She's 38 years old, but she's still a legend.
And breaks wickets.
And the second, and the second probably memory that is really special is beating the champions of the domestic circuit, Railways, in a super over match in one of the T20s that we played. So the match, it looked like we were down and out. Our lower order pushed, and we pushed the match into a super over. And
you
then
bowled that
Smriti.
super over?
Yeah, but first Smriti, we played for the same team, so she went out and gave us a good start, and then I came and bowled a super over and closed out the match. That was very, very satisfying. I got Harmanpreet Kaur out in that super over, and Mithali Raj was at the crease. So despite those stars being there in that Railways team, for us to beat them was one of the biggest achievements of our lives.
Why did you stop? Like, I'm sorry.
So I stopped because at the age of 28, I realized that I was making a push for the Indian team. I didn't get selected, which is fair enough. But I realized that for my second career, whatever I do next, I need some time to set myself up in that career. So I can't retire at the age of 35, because then, I'm not sure how much time I'll be able to give to whatever my second career is. So if I wanted to get into media, needed to give myself some time to establish myself in that. This is the situation for many people, which is why we lose talent, because I was lucky that I had a Railways job side by side with playing cricket. So that's what supported me through playing cricket. But I knew I wasn't going to do that my entire life. That was only as long as I played cricket. So then I had to quit that as well and move from a government job, security of salary coming in and never being able to lose that job, to freelance media work. Because that was what I wanted to do.
And that takes guts. That is something that really takes guts. But it's inspiring. Nevertheless, I have to say it's very, very inspiring. And I hope like more girls like look up to people like you and look up to all the players as well who have played and who are still playing and make the right choice.
Yeah, hope so.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Snehal. It's been amazing. And thank you so much for so many like amazing insights as well. And we shall see you again soon, hopefully.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Take care.